Hey, everybody, what's happening? It is that time of year. It is mid-March, and as you can see behind my man Ryan Ross's head, it's bracket time. March Madness. That gave us the thought. Well, let's do some countdowns here. And we are so blessed, Ryan, to be here with the success Michigan and Michigan State have had over the past, gosh, I don't even know how many years, 25, 30, 40 years. So we've got some great moments. So we said, why don't we count them down? These are local moments, our top 5 local moments in the NCAA tournament. And it doesn't have to be Michigan and Michigan State. It could be Eastern Michigan. It could be Central Michigan. They knocked off Duke with Chris Kaman back in 2003. Could be things like that. So we're going to run down our top 5, and we also have some honorable mentions in there as well. But Ryan, we did want to say one thing. I was not alive for Larry Bird against Magic Johnson in 1979. I was about a year away. So I know all about it. You were a youngster then. Obviously, I know about it. I've seen the highlights. I've seen the entire game. Everybody knows that's the highest rated basketball game in college history, still to this day. So that is not going to be included on our list. That is kind of on its own. You know, that is like the gold star winner. Yeah, way above. We're putting that over here. These are 5 others. And, of course, mine will be that were in my lifetime. But that one is an obvious, man, right? That's got to be like near the top or number 1 on everybody's list. So we're leaving that one alone, Ryan.
Yeah, and that was also a prelude to one of the great individual and team rivalries in the NBA.
Yeah.
That was sort of like the introduction to it, right? So,
yeah.
And we saw them battle in, 5 different NBA finals throughout the 1980s?
3, but yes. Yeah. And the Celtics won 3 and the Lakers won 5 with Magic, and the just amazing rivalry they had. Now they're good buddies and all that. It made the NBA what it is. So that is its own deal. So that's going over there. So anyway, top 5 local NCAA tournament moments. And Ryan, we'll begin with you. What do you got, man, at number 5?
All right, my number 5, I'm going to take you all the way back to 2018. I know, right? For some, it does kind of seem like a lifetime ago with this pandemic and everything that's happened in the last year. But second round, Michigan, Houston. I think it was the 3-6 matchup in the West region. Yeah, 3-6 in the West. Well, we all know how that turned out. Jordan Poole hit the buzzer beater, the brash freshman from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, nails the buzzer beater. They mob him around the court. Of course, the iconic image of Mo Wagner right as they're celebrating, seeing Devin Davis from Houston, who had a great game, sobbing because he knows his missed free throws are what gave Michigan that opportunity. And Michigan eventually had some breaks go their way with the way the bracket bounced out in the West, got to the Final Four, made it to the championship game before they bowed out to a stacked Villanova team. But yeah, in my lifetime, and I'm up there in my mid-40s, that's the only true buzzer beater for my team that I've ever witnessed live that I can think of off the top of my head, like a true buzzer beater. I've seen some big shots, that in the closing seconds, obviously some that we'll get to later in the show. But, I mean, they had 3 seconds. They had to go the length of the court. You had Isaiah Livers, who's still on the team today. He was a freshman back then, with the sweet baseball pass to Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman, draws defenders to the middle of the court, finds his man in the deep right wing, and with the legs split in the air, the kid knocks it down, and with a defender in his face, Houston defended it pretty well. It was a great moment and a great game. It was back and forth, a real defensive battle, and I remember watching that and thinking, they're not going to win this game.
Right.
I felt bad. I really didn't have a good feeling about that game all the way through until that shot went through, and then
that was one that a lot of people had Houston winning that game. When the brackets came out, people were saying, hey, this Houston team is underseeded at 6. This team could make a run here. A lot of people had them winning that game, and then it took the miracle shot from Jordan Poole. And I think you nailed it. And I have the exact opposite memory of this game. I covered this team. I traveled with this team. I was in San Antonio for the Final Four. I was not at this game, though. I was actually with someone I worked with. I was having a meeting, like a dinner meeting that day, and we're like, oh, we'll stay and watch the game afterward. So I'm sitting there, meeting gets done, everything goes great. You know, Michigan State was playing at Little Caesars Arena, remember, as well. That's another reason we didn't travel, because we had our team playing in Detroit. So we were trying to figure out our game plan to cover Michigan State coming up. And this happens, and I get eaten by technology. I get a text that I need to answer fairly quickly. Thought I could do it real quick. No. So I look down at my phone. I type whatever I typed. He hits the shot. Place goes crazy. I look up, and I see Jordan Poole running around like an idiot.
Yeah.
I missed it.
You probably heard the horn on audio, maybe, right, as you're looking at your phone?
Yeah. I mean, I saw the ball go through the hoop, but I did not, I didn't see who shot it. I didn't see what, I didn't know. Next thing I just see Jordan running with his arms flailing and, so, yeah, probably will never happen again in our lifetime.
Probably not.
Massive shot. Keeps them alive. They get to the national championship game, and I freaking get eaten by the iPhone. Unbelievable. That is probably the reason that game and that shot are not on my top 5 list.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. That's a good one, man. That's a real good one. Number 5 for me, I'm going to go to the Michigan State route. This is also games that I was at these games, covering these games. The year is 2005, and it is Austin, Texas. Michigan State knocks off Duke in the Sweet 16, the number 1 seed, and then knocks off Kentucky, the 2 seed, in the same exact weekend. It's Izzo's first win over Duke, tied at 32 at the half. State pulls away at the end. They win it by 10. Awesome. That's great. And what do you get for your, now you get to play Kentucky, a stacked Kentucky team. Rajon Rondo on that team. This was quite possibly the best basketball game I've ever been at. Goes double OT. If you don't remember, this is the game Patrick Sparks just throws up this prayer from the top of the key. The ball bounces all the way around. Then, literally stopped on the rim before falling in. Just unbelievable. Michigan State pulls away in the end. Shannon Brown had 24 points. I think he missed 1 or 2 shots that entire game. He was incredible. That weekend was incredible. And you're in Austin, Texas, one of the most fun towns there is to be in on the planet, but you knock off possibly the 2 best programs of all time in Duke and Kentucky in the same weekend. And this was an underachieving team, too. If you remember, Michigan State was the 5 seed.
I was going to say, I thought they were a 5, yeah.
Yeah. And this is the team that had Calvin Torbert, Chris Hill, Shannon Brown, Mo Ager, guys that didn't quite ever get over that hump. And they were supposed to, this team's going to go to numerous Final Fours and they're going to win a national title. And it never happened. They finally did it that weekend. They finally put it all together. Paul Davis on that team as well. Yeah, it was just sweet, man. I'll never forget that game. I'll never forget that shot. I'll never forget that weekend forever. Let's move on, man. Number 4, Ryan, what do you got? Local, top 5 NCAA tournaments of our lifetime, man. What do you got?
My number 4, speaking of Tom Izzo and underachieving teams, take you back to 2016. Michigan State, Denzel Valentine. Who else did they have? I'm drawing a blank. They had a lot of good players on that team. I'm just drawing a blank on who else they had. But he was the leader, and they're fresh off a Big Ten tournament win, 29-5 at the end of the regular season after the Big Ten tournament. Thought they were set up to be the number 1 seed. They end up getting the number 2 seed. Tom Izzo was publicly a little upset about that, and rightfully so, because I think they deserve to be a 1 seed. But even
Right.
as a 2, the 4 number ones that year weren't considered like super strong number ones, and I think most people were Michigan State was the trendy pick for people.
Mhm.
And when they lost to 15 seeded Middle Tennessee, that shredded a whole lot of brackets,
Yep.
including mine. And but
Everybody was picking them. Obama picked them. I mean,
Obama
everybody.
did. Yep. I remember Denzel Washington's brother, Denzel Valentine, guaranteed a national championship. He was kind of goaded into it by a member of the press because Mateen had done something similar when they did win it in 2000. But they just ran into an absolute buzzsaw because Middle Tennessee came out right at the start, jumped out to a 15-2 lead. Tom Izzo calls timeout. And that's all he could do for the rest of the game is call timeout and watch Middle Tennessee State just go on these runs and make all these shots. Reggie Upshaw, Giddy Potts.
Giddy
Potts, perhaps the greatest name in NCAA tournament history, right? So, ended up losing by 9. I think they did get within like a bucket or 2 in the second half, but every time they'd get close, Middle Tennessee State would just go on a run.
Dude, I was at this game. I was sitting in the front row, and I could not believe what I was seeing. I just absolutely could not believe what I was seeing. And you just said it. Every time State would pull within 4, all of a sudden the lead was at least 8 again. They would come right down. Giddy Potts, boom. Upshaw, boom. 3, 3, 3, 3. Over and over again that happened. Every single time. And you knew State, okay, all right, this has got to be it. They've got to cool off now.
Yeah.
They didn't cool off. Middle Tennessee State shot 58% from 3 in that game. And it's
insane.
Not like Michigan State played bad. State puts up 81 points, and they shoot 55.5% in the game. And they lose by 9. I mean,
Matt Costello's had a career game.
Matt Costello was incredible.
Yep.
Yeah, and I said it, and it has since been finally we got a 16 beat a 1 with Virginia 2 years ago, I think it was, whenever it was. Yep. This was the biggest upset in NCAA tournament history to that point. This was the biggest upset because, as you said, everybody thought MSU was a 1 seed. They had the National Player of the Year in Denzel Valentine. Bryn Forbes was his sidekick, who has made a nice little NBA career for himself. Dede Davis was on this team. You mentioned Costello as a senior. Aaron Harris is on this team. Yeah, this team was absolutely loaded. And you mentioned Denzel. I asked him the day before in the locker room. I don't remember the exact question I asked, but it was about a letdown. It was about getting upset because there was an upset that happened and people were asking him about it. And he's like, well, yeah, we know you just hope it's not you. You know, upsets are going to happen. That's what this tournament is, but you just hope it's not you. And then it was. It was unbelievable. In the year before, Michigan State had lost in the Final Four. Matt Costello sobbing. He was sobbing. He could not stop crying. This year, his senior year, his last game, he just sits there like this. I mean, emotionless. He was emotionless. It was like he lost his soul. Like he was just a statue sitting there. He could not believe it. It was crazy.
That's what the tournament's all about, though, man. It is the true epitome of, agony of defeat, thrill of victory, agony of defeat.
Yep.
And you mentioned Denzel Valentine. Like, of course, that was also his last game as a Spartan, and he had 13 points on 5 of 13 shooting, committed 6 turnovers in that game. I think Michigan State had something like 18 turnovers or something.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I would too. I don't know if that's numbers right, but it was something
I
crazy
couldn't.
like
I
that.
just still to this day I can't believe it. And I didn't think. I mean, I knew maybe it would happen, but I did not think we would see a 16 beat a 1. I was one of those that was like,
Yeah.
man, I don't know. Like somebody would have to get hurt or something, something crazy. So I mean, I thought this was going to be the biggest upset that I had ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And
This was the 8th time, and there's been 9 total. There's been one since the 15's beaten a 2.
yep,
But I don't know that maybe Duke Lehigh, but I don't know if there's another 15 or 2 that was so heavily favored,
right.
not only to beat the 15, obviously, but to go to the Final Four and potentially win the championship.
Yep. Yep. I mean, they were that good. And then, of course, not only do you have the National Player of the Year, you got Tom Izzo as your coach, and they just shot the lights out that game. They absolutely shot the lights out. Yeah, State shoots 55.6%. They shot 46% from 3. I mean, it's not like they played bad. These dudes just wouldn't stop hitting shots. It was incredible. I do not have that on my list. I have that as one of my honorable mentions. But, yeah, that is a memorable moment, my man.
It's a painful memory for a lot of Spartan fans. So
Absolutely. Yeah, it sure is, man, because, any other day they win that game. Any other day. Well, speaking of shooting out of your mind, my number 4 is Trey Burke's shot in the Sweet 16 against Kansas, 2013. Michigan wins 87-85 in overtime, but they get to overtime because of Trey's Steph Curry land shot with 4 seconds to play, and he ties it at 76, and they go to overtime. Trey was incredible in the second half. He didn't score in the first half. He ends up with 23 and 10. All 23 are in the second half, and he just single-handedly took that game over in the last couple of minutes, and that shot is the one that is the memorable one. Coming up, left side of the court, far side of the court, pulls up, drills it. Now, the funny thing with this is I was in Indianapolis covering Michigan State. The game before is going on. I'm waiting for tip-off. I'm in my seat. I've got my laptop there. I've got the March Madness app pulled up on it, so I get to watch the games. And I'm sitting in the 200 level, and I've got this game, on a 15-inch laptop or whatever it is. Everybody around me is watching my computer screen, all the fans, because this game was out of control, and when you're in media row, you're not supposed to cheer. You're not supposed to nothing. Right. But we are in like a 70,000 seat stadium. Who gives a rip? And I'm not cheering for that game. He hits that shot, and everybody around me, like a whole section, and then I'm cheering too, like, oh, and then the other media people are looking at me, what in the world? Would you like lose your mind? What is wrong with you, And I'm like, oh, you got Trey Burke just hit the shot. Oh, my gosh, they're going to – it was awesome. I will never forget that either.
So I have this as my number 3 pick, and I actually watched this game today. The shortened down version, like the 12-minute version on YouTube. Michigan was down by 14 with 6 minutes to go, and down by 10 with 2.5 minutes to go before Burke just went off. But it all started the run start when they were down 10. The run started on a defensive play by Glenn Robinson. He deflected a pass and ended up – it was pretty sweet. He kind of knocked it back toward the other end of the floor, and he outraced the Kansas guy, grabbed it in stride and dunked it from like the dotted line. It was pretty sweet. But, it was an amazing comeback. And, of course, Kansas helped out too because Elijah Johnson missed the front end of a 1-and-1 just before Burke hit that shot to tie the game.
Yep.
So, again, Michigan's opponent missing free throws at the end of the game kind of helps them out a little bit. But
hey, that's the game, man.
that's part of the game. Mitch McGary was great in that game too. He had 25 and 14.
Yeah, that's when the Mitch McGary stock really started flying. They really did. They came together.
That Kansas team was loaded. They had Elijah Johnson. They had Ben McLemore, who was a lottery pick and ended up being a bust, but
Right.
he was a great college player.
Mine might be number one on some people's list here at number 3. The Flintstones, 2000. They win the national championship, Izzo's only title, Michigan State's second title. They beat Florida in the national championship game. You see every year during March Madness, you see the shot of Mateen running out on the court when the buzzer sounds, jumping into Mo Pete's arms. You see that in all the montages and everything, you know. But that's not my moment. My moment is after the game, Mateen Cleaves, locally, not nationally, everybody sees that shot of Mateen. Locally, and some nationally, when Michigan State got the trophy and watched one shining moment up on the Jumbotron at the RCA Dome, the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis, Mateen loses it. Just absolutely starts bawling like a little kid. Just absolutely loses it because, as most kids now, his dream was to have one shining moment. And he had actually told Jim Nantz at a game his sophomore season, hey, man, one day you're playing that for us. You are going to play that song for us, Jim. I'm telling you, dude, you are going to play it. And they did, and he lost it. There's CBS actually did a story on that. I think you can find that on YouTube. But anytime around here, you see it in Lansing all the time. You know, you see it in Flint TV also. And Izzo is just standing there stoic, and he's smiling, but he's standing there as strong as can be. And his leader, his main dude, is on his shoulder, weeping like a little kid, man.
I've seen that picture.
That is incredible to me. That is all time. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, yeah, not so much the win, that moment right there. Number 2 all time, Ryan. Go ahead.
Well, I got it probably deserves to be number 1, but because it leaves such a wound with me, I'm gonna rank it number 2 and end on a positive. But the infamous timeout by Chris Webber in the 1993 national championship game. You know, it's funny. I'm looking at my notes here, and I titled it "Chris Webber calls timeout with none left to cost U of M the title."
Yeah.
In actuality, that didn't cost them the title.
No,
because they were still losing by 2. There was only like 11 seconds to go. Had he not called timeout, who's to say they would have? First of all, not turned it over.
Right.
Second of all, if they would have made a shot to tie or go ahead.
Right.
But here's the kicker. Before all of that happened, Chris Webber walked, and everybody knew it.
And that's why he probably called timeout, because he panicked.
He was rattled. Yeah, he was rattled for sure. But, yeah, I mean, I can still remember Billy Packer calling it out on the broadcast. Oh, he traveled.
Yep.
You know, and so, yeah, there was a lot of heartbreak with that one. But, you know, that team, obviously that was the Fab Five, and it was their sophomore year, you know, so there was more expected out of them. They were expected to – it was basically a national championship or bust because they'd already been to the Final Four as freshmen.
They went to the title game.
Went to the title game, lost to one of the greatest teams of NCAA history probably.
Yep.
It's a pain, as much as it pains me to admit that. But they go to they don't win the Big Ten. They finish second, I think, or second or third. I think second to Indiana. So they go, but they're still a number 1 seed. They go out west. And in the second round, they play a 9-seeded UCLA team that was probably underseeded because a lot of those players from that team would go on 2 years later to win the national championship. They were down 18 in the second half. They come all the way back and win it in overtime. And then in the Final Four, the game before the North Carolina game, they beat probably the best team, and I believe the number 1 ranked team in the country in Kentucky that year in a great semifinal game with Jamal Mashburn. So you just felt like they were destined to win it. And the North Carolina team was really good too, but I mean, is in the pantheon of great North Carolina teams, I wouldn't necessarily put that team up there.
No, because none of them had great success either afterward. I mean, Eric Montross played in the NBA a couple of years. George Lynch did too, but those aren't like North Carolina dudes. When you think of all the people that have gone to Carolina, you're not.
Pat Sullivan was an assistant coach with
Yeah,
the Pistons for a little while.
right. Yeah, he was on that
Yeah,
team.
he
Played
was
a
on that
couple of
team.
minutes. I think he scored like one basket. Yeah,
He's the one that missed he missed the free throw that Weber inbounded when he took the
right.
extra step and lifted his pivot foot and didn't get called for it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
This is my number one moment because even people that weren't alive, this is like the magic bird thing. People who weren't alive when this happened know about this. It's a running gag for every Michigan hater that there is till this day. Anytime anything, you want to call timeout? It's never going away. It's never going away. And now this dude is a finalist for the Hall of Fame again. Chris Webber, that is, pronouns, pal. And he is probably going to start hearing about this again now that he's up for the Hall of Fame. All of this is going to come up again as this tournament goes on. I'm sure there will be stories on this again. I mean, it's a running gag 28 years later. It is just never, ever gonna go. It's not only the top moment in my mind locally in 40 years. You said it. It's top 5 maybe in NCAA tournament history, no matter what state you're in. It is just that memorable. The 30 for 30. My math class, my teacher did not teach us the next day. We spent the entire class talking about that game and talking about what happened and why they lost, because he called it the day before. He told us they were going to lose. And then he told us about that for a while, then about being prepared and this and this and this, and Weber wasn't prepared. And the dude played. Here's the other thing, man. The guy scored like 23, had like 23 and 11 in that game. He was absolutely incredible. And then he just had a brain fart, and there were people telling him on the bench to call timeout. But
Michael Talley,
you could see him doing it.
Yeah.
Yep. But the other thing that it also did, we'll never forget that. He goes on to be the number 1 pick in the draft, and he will make the Hall of Fame, whether it's this year or whenever. He is going to be a Hall of Famer, and he should already be there. But he was not the same player. I mean, you watch even those Sacramento teams that were very, very good that ran into the Lakers with Shaq and Kobe. He didn't want the ball at the end of those games.
No,
he did not.
It screwed with his psyche for sure.
Exactly.
There's no doubt. But
he was different. He was still sweet. Don't get me wrong. And one of the best passing big men. I mean, the man was just incredible and does not get the credit he deserves for how good he really was. But he would have been better had it not been for that timeout. It really did mess with him. That is my number 1, just because of the, I don't want to say cultural significance because I don't think that's the right, but basketball culture, it is, I mean, that's historical, an all-time moment. Historical. So, yeah, it's an all-time moment, man.
I mean,
unfortunately.
Yeah, it's up there with Jordan's shot and Jimmy Valvano running out the court after the NC State upset and a few other, moments that, you always see on the open whenever the tournament starts, It's like,
it's
oh, I got to see that away. Again.
Yeah. Well, imagine how he feels. Imagine how he feels. So, yeah, there's that, man. So, if that's my number 1, I will let you say what my number 2 is, because I am sure that is going to be your number 1. What do you got on top? Best local moment for you in the past 40 years or so in the NCAA tournament?
My number 1 is 1989. U of M goes to the national championship and actually wins it for a change, behind one of the most historical tournament runs by a individual player that you'll ever going to see in Glenn Rice, who is a Flintstone. That we talked about the Flintstones from Michigan State. This was, I'm sure, I don't think I'm being brash in saying he's by far the best player out of Flint that's ever played at the University of Michigan, and probably one of the best that's
he's the
ever.
Best. Period.
Yeah,
he's the best. There's nobody. Pam McGee and Deanna Nolan are the only ones that could have any word with Glenn. He won at every level. He was an all-star. They're the only ones that can see him.
Yeah. So, and another reason why this was my number one was just all of the storylines that built prior to the tournament starting.
Yes.
So you had Michigan finish the regular season. I think they had 7 losses, 5 in conference. They finished third behind Indiana and Illinois in the Big Ten. The Big Ten was loaded that year, at least top heavy. But Michigan's coach, Bill Frieder, had announced that he was accepting an offer to become the new head basketball coach at Arizona State, which that was kind of a baffling career move, but whatever. But he was planning on continuing, fulfilling his duties as Michigan head coach
right
at the end of the year. However, new athletic director Bo Schembechler, the former and legendary Michigan football coach, says a Michigan man will coach a Michigan team, and he fired Frieder and appointed his top assistant Steve Fisher as the interim head coach, and that he would coach the team in the NCAA tournament. And I think a lot of people looked at that as, well, you guys shouldn't forget about Michigan's chances of getting the Final Four or winning a title. And they just absolutely blew the doors off Virginia in the regional final. I think it was 102-65. And then the great game against Illinois. Illinois had handled them in the regular season, beat them twice by a combined 28 points. And Michigan, just one of the great games. I think there was 27 lead changes in that semifinal game, and you had the Sean Higgins putback with 1 second left, true freshman at the time, and then the overtime win against Seton Hall and Ramil hitting the free throws. I mean, it was just a great run, start to finish, and one of the all-time great performances, like I said, by an individual player, ends up setting a NCAA record for most points scored in a tournament.
Still stands today.
Still stands today, 184 points. And I believe he did hold the record for most threes made. I don't know if he still holds that or not.
Yes, Steph Curry probably broke that in one weekend. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure.
In like 2 games, right?
Right.
But yeah, that's my number one, and I'm sticking to it. So sorry, time out.
No, that's good, man. I have it at number 2 behind, just because everybody on earth remembers the timeout. So I got it at number 2, and I have Ramil's free throws at the end as the moment I will never forget, even though Glenn Rice was the man, averaged 30 a game in that tournament, and the Flint guy and everything. I'll get into that in a second, but Ramil is what I will never forget. And I'll never forget watching that game. I was at my grandma's house, going crazy watching this game. And the thing is, too, Ramil was a terrible free throw shooter. He was like a 60% free throw shooter. Yep. But in this game,
he went 8 for 9.
Yeah, he went 8 for 9. And he had already hit a ton of them before that. And then he gets up there and he hits those 2 and to clinch the thing. But also, we talked about them getting breaks, people missing free throws. So I don't know what was worse. You tell me, what is worse, the phantom foul on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar up against Bill Laimbeer in the 88 finals that ended up losing the finals for the Pistons in 88, or this foul by Gerald Green on Ramil, who was pretty much out of control when he came running down the lane. I don't know if he even got a fingernail on him, and they called a foul and sent him to the free throw line. But he
did get bumped on the hip a little bit, but he also drove the lane like 1-on-4. So usually when you do that, you don't get rewarded with a whistle, especially in the last 5 seconds of a game.
Yeah. So, they got a little lucky on that one.
Got a fortuitous whistle there.
They did. That was the payback for him a year previous when Laimbeer got the whistle called on him against Kareem. Man, that was kind of rough. But, hey, he got up there and he hit the free throws. I will never forget that.
That's a great call by you, because not only was he like 60%, during the regular season, he was worse than that in the tournament.
He was like
57%.
Yes.
But he went 8 for 9 in that game, and calmly. And Seton Hall called a timeout right before they were about to bounce
Oh
the
my
ball to him.
gosh. Yes.
And then he comes back out, and I remember watching a documentary. It might have been like one of those Big Ten Elite things or something that they run on the Big Ten Network or something, and they talked about how during the timeout, like nobody really said anything to Ramil. They were just kind of going over what they were going to do
Right.
after he made the free throws and whatnot. So they come out of the timeout, and Michigan had subbed in Mike Griffin, who was kind of a role player on that team.
And he
And
went and
walks up
talked
to
to him.
Ramil. He's like, Ramil's just kind of wandering around. So I just walked up, put my arm on him, and said, "You got this," or whatever he said.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like,
yeah, Ramil was at half court after he was all the way over. Like, what are you doing?
you got some free throws to make, man. What are you doing over here? You know? But
yeah, dude, that whole, you mentioned some of the things though, man. I mean, there are so many things that happened because of this game. You mentioned Steve Fisher. It was 19 days before. It was right before the tournament. He is the interim head coach.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the Michigan man thing started. This is where it started, that we hear to this day. I want a Michigan man coaching Michigan. You know, that this is where that started.
And isn't it funny how it's like locally, it's always attributed to the football team because Bo said it.
It's Bo,
it was actually about the basketball team.
Yep, absolutely.
And
then if you want to go hyper local, you know, you and I are both from the Flint area. Anybody who's watching this, we talked earlier about the Flint Stones, Mateen Cleaves and all them. They really are the ones that started the Flint to Michigan State pipeline. Before that, most, not all, but most of the good Flint players went to Michigan, going all the way back. Bill Frieder was the old coach at Flint Northern High School. He won state championships at Flint Northern, then went as an assistant at Michigan and then became the head coach. Glenn Rice, Demetrius Caleb, who's on that team. He is from Flint Northern High School as well. Just so many super local, as far as we are concerned, connections on that team, because Michigan was where everybody went for the most part as far as basketball goes. So that is kind of cool for us, guys who were around there. And then one other thing that came from that, if you're a kid that was born in the 80s or late 90s or whatever, the Just Do It thing, slogan, Nike slogan, was like the coolest thing on earth, man. Like that was it. Nike was really starting to blow up. Jordan was just starting to blow up, and everything was just do it Nike, just do it Nike. They win, and they don't put on like national champion Michigan hats, like stuff you see today, and T-shirts and whatnot. No, they put on white Nike hats that just say, that's all it says, just did it. That was what they wore when they won the net. So if you were a kid and I was 9 years old, that was the coolest freaking thing on earth, man. I'm like, I want one of those hats, man. I got to have it. It didn't say Michigan, didn't say NCAA, didn't say champion. No, I didn't. I do have a shirt. I did get a shirt. And I also had that cool shirt too where, you know, the Pistons then won their first title a couple of months later, and it said the basketball capital of the world. And it had an arrow pointing, it had the United States, and it had an arrow pointing to Ann Arbor, arrow pointing to Detroit as well. Nice. So, yeah, that was the coolest shirt ever, too. But no, that Just Did It hat. Now I'm thinking about it when we started doing this. I'm like, man, I got to see if one of those are on eBay or something, you know, probably $1 billion. But no, it was just so cool.
That, actually.
And you remember, too, the Fab Five then came in and became the coolest thing on earth. You know, they were these cultural icons. Everybody was wearing Michigan gear. It was the number one selling thing. The baggy shorts. Yeah, I wanted those shorts so bad. And, you know, every rap video had dudes wearing Michigan gear and whatnot, you know, back then. And really, even before them, these guys with their Just Did It hats. I mean, that to me is something I will never forget either. But yeah, and then Steve Fisher gets the head coaching job because of this. Then he goes and recruits the Fab Five and the Five Revive and all of those. I mean, and then obviously the scandals happen. Does that happen if Steve Fisher's there? Or does it not happen if Steve Fisher is not the coach? Just so much came out of this one little 3-week period. all because Bill Frieder took the Arizona State job. Some reporter broke the news, and all hell broke loose. Anything else, man, that stands out? We didn't. We got so excited we didn't do some of our runners up, man. Honorable mentions. What just missed your list, man?
A couple of things. The Fab Five team the year before the timeout, when they were all freshmen, they made a heck of a run to the Final Four as a 6 seed. So I just kind of mostly just included that run, but specifically the regional final against Ohio State. I remember watching that game. It was actually at my grandparents', and they lived in Florida. We would take annual trips down to Florida to see my grandparents, always kind of right around it was whenever our spring break was. It usually coincided with the tournament.
Yep.
And the way my grandparents' house was set up is they had this kitchen that kind of rolled into a little fake living room that went out into the patio, and that's where most people kind of hung out. And then they had a real living room that was facing the front of the house that it was always super dark in there because nobody was ever in there. And I would always be in there by myself watching tournament games.
Yeah.
And I remember that I watched that game, and it went to overtime, and Michigan beat them after losing twice during the regular season to the Buckeyes. And then later that day, I think it was the same day, was the Duke-Kentucky game, one of the most famous and greatest college basketball games ever.
Right.
The next thing you know, like everybody in the house are sitting there watching that game, and I'm the only one that's even gives a crap. So,
yeah.
So that stood out. The other one, two other ones. Eastern Michigan in 1996, upsetting Duke behind a diminutive 5'5" star named Earl Boykins.
Yeah.
That was good, and we got to represent one of the directional schools, right? You talked about Central and Chris Kaman, so we'll throw Eastern in there. And the final one was the year after the 1989 championship. Michigan returned most of that team intact, sans Glenn Rice, but Robinson was still there. I believe Terry Mills was still there, Loy Vaught.
Yep.
And they, I believe, if I remember rightly, were a number 1 seed out west, if not a number 2. I have to look that up. But they ended up running, maybe it was a 3, I don't know. They were a top 3 seed, but they ended up running into Loyola Marymount in the second round, and that was the year that they had National Player of the Year candidate Hank Gathers on that team, and during their conference tournament, he collapsed on the court and passed away, unfortunately. Yeah. And that team sort of rallied around him, coached by famous Paul Westhead.
Yes,
passed
the
away
guru of Go.
The Guru of Go. A great documentary. But, that sort of stands out just because of that and the fact that I think they scored like 150 points on us that day.
They scored 149 points.
Yeah.
And they scored 84 points in the second half.
Insane.
Like, it's video game numbers. Man. You don't get 84 an entire game now.
No.
You do not. They shot 55% from the field, 52 from 3. Unbelievable.
52% from 3.
Some dude, listen to this now. Now, Bo Kimball, who was a first-round lottery pick, also, they had 2 guys on that team, Hank Gathers and Bo Kimball. Bo Kimball, who was a terrible NBA player, but he was a lottery pick. He had 37 points in this game, 11 of 29. But he didn't lead them in scoring. Some guy named Jeff Fryer went 15 of 20 for 41 points.
A guy who looked like he could be your accountant. This dude just was unconscious. I do remember that. I was going to say the name for you but I wasn't 100% sure that was it. But
he was 11 of 15 from 3.
You just don't see that now. I mean, if anything, you're seeing
because there's a thing called defense
50s.
now. There's a thing called defense now.
There's a thing called defense,
which is the biggest misnomer that there is, that the defense was way better in the 80s and whatnot. That is the biggest pile of crap ever.
Right.
That is the biggest misnomer. Like, if anybody ever says that, I just stop listening. You don't know what you're
it's
talking about.
it's the defense, and I think it's also like the lack of athleticism, because that kind of
Exactly.
coincides with defense. These guys
Exactly.
can just hound you now. I mean, they're just so much bigger, so much stronger, so much faster.
Exactly.
But sometimes with that, you don't have, the shooting mechanics and the fundamentals maybe sometimes are lacking. And I think those all contribute to lower scoring games now that we see. But you definitely see a lot more games in college basketball now that where both teams fall short of 60 than you do of eclipsing 90.
Absolutely. Any other honorable mentions? I got a couple. Do you have any?
That's all. That's all I had. Those three.
Yeah, and you were right. Michigan was a 3 that year.
There were three.
And
Okay.
Loyola Marymount was an 11 seed,
11.
and they pulled the upset there, 149 to 115.
If you score 115 points in a college basketball game and you don't win by at least 30,
Right.
but you lost by 34, like how does that happen?
I would like to go look up when was the last time anybody even scored 115, like in a major conference college basketball game.
I can't remember seeing it, even in like multiple overtime games. Do you still have that pulled up in front of you? Because I'm curious, how far did Loyola Marymount go? Didn't they lose their next game?
I'll have to look it up.
They make it to
they beat Alabama. They beat Alabama 62-60, and they score 62 points after scoring 149. Then they turn around and they lose to, guess who? The Running Rebels of UNLV, 131 to 101 in the West Regional Final.
Wow, they almost scored as many as Loyola did.
And I mean, again, you look at these box scores, man. Jeff Fryer had 21 in that game, but he was only 7 of 24. Bo Kimball had 42 and 11. And you want to talk about loaded teams, man. Here you go. Anderson Hunt, 30. Larry Johnson, 20 and 18.
Dang.
Anderson Hunt also had 13 assists, 6 steals. Stacey Augmon, 33 and 11.
Yeah.
Greg Anthony only went for 21 and 8.
Yeah, what was his problem?
Yeah.
He was too busy thinking about that announcer gig he was going to pick up when he got older.
8 of 10 from the field. They shot 60%. And Loyola Marymount scored 101 points and shot 37%. It's freaking insanity, dude.
I don't have the math skills to even figure out how that works in a 40-minute game, but
oh no, man. It was pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. All right, before we roll out of here, I had a couple other ones just recently. The last tournament we actually had, Michigan State finally beats Duke again. Zion Williamson and the boys. Yeah. That was a zoo. That was a game I was at in Washington, D.C. That was an absolute zoo. Like Zion, I have never covered anything like this in college basketball, because normally when people get to his level, they're gone, and Kobe Bryant didn't go to college, and I wouldn't have been covering him anyway. But any of those guys, they weren't around. And this dude, I mean, when he walked in the room to go to the podium or the locker room or wherever you were at, it was like a hush over the atmosphere changed in the room. Every single place he was. It was incredible, man. It was I've never seen anything like it. And
it's that way in the NBA with him now.
Yeah. Yeah. And now and Michigan
and he seems like a really nice, down-to-earth kid too.
That's the biggest takeaway I had. And I was one of them. I'm like, I want to see Zion. I want to talk to Zion. I want to ask Zion a question. Every time anybody would ask him a question, it was like, oh shucks, oh gee. It was totally like, gee willikers, I don't. He was the nicest, most unassuming. And every question was like, so Zion, when you guys win the national championship, Zion, when you win National Player of the Year, Zion, when you sign $1 billion Nike contract, what are you? Oh gee, I just want to play basketball. He was like the nicest kid ever, man. He was cool, man, and I was a fan immediately. And I've never seen anybody like that either. Like, just so unassuming, just happy to be there, just wanted to play with his buddies, man. And he's a cool dude. He's a cool dude for sure.
That Duke team had not one, not two, but 3 lottery picks on its team.
Yep.
And Sparty took them down.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, yeah, that was awesome. That was, I'll never forget that one. Quickly, Corey Lucius with the buzzer beater over Maryland in the tournament. Yep. Caitlin Lucas tore his Achilles early on. Corey saves the day, and he was huge and, took them to a Final Four that year. So that was a big one. And then a sad one for many people. North Carolina butchering Michigan State at Ford Field in the national championship game. I don't remember what the score was. It was over immediately. I forget what the score was, but it was like 15-2 or something like that. I mean,
it was not
I'll
close.
Just never forget it. And I was sitting in the front row. I was right under the hoop. National championship. Was that my first national championship game?
76,000 people just.
Yeah.
And most of them were pulling for state, but.
Yeah.
Just wasn't enough.
And I was sitting right behind the North Carolina cheerleading squad. And every single time, heels, every time. And they're winning by like 1,000. So they're doing this chant every 5 seconds. And it just became a comedy routine with all of us that were sitting there just laughing at.
That's hilarious.
Every single, and these cheerleaders are like 4'9", so you little high-pitched voice and heels. And, I mean, it just became a routine. Like, all right, how many times is that girl right there going to say it in the next 10 minutes? Oh, what's the over-under? I got 11. What do you got?
Yeah, you guys got to start doing side bets.
We
just
did,
to keep
because
it
the game was over. That's exactly what we did, too. That is exactly what we did, too, because the game was over. So we're like, I bet you $10 she says it 10 times in the next 10 minutes. Okay, go. And that's how we spent the rest of that game. But
that was one of the most lopsided championship games in history, and it may have been the most, at least in modern history. But you can't slight Sparty on that, because I don't think it would have mattered who was going up against that North Carolina team. They were getting smoked.
At that time, that was probably the best team in modern history to that point. That's probably the best college basketball team in probably like 20 years. Mm-hmm. If you look back at who all was on that team, man. I mean, Dejon Thompson and Tyler Hansbrough was an incredible college player. He wasn't obviously a great NBA player, but Danny Green, who's still in the league. Ty Lawson was the fastest freaking basketball player I'd ever seen. Wayne Ellington is on that team.
It's a current Piston.
Current Detroit Piston, yeah. I mean, that team was just loaded. Larry Drew, Zeller coming off the bench. I mean,
wow.
Well, we're going to do this again, Rye, and everybody else, if anybody gives a rip. We're going to do the same thing, and we are going to go 10 national moments in the NCAA tournament. And, dude, I'm telling you right now, that's hard to do, man.
Hard to pinpoint, man.
There are so many. I mean, you get like 10 every tournament, let alone you trying to take 10 all time or, gosh, dude.
There's usually, between buzzer beaters and major upsets, there's usually at least a half dozen of those every single tournament.
Yep. Sure is. Sometimes in one weekend. So, well, yeah, buddy. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
We're going to do this one more time here in a little bit. We'll just dump out the 10 national best moments. So thanks for tuning in. If you have any special ones, did we leave anything out? Hit us in the comments. Let us know if we left anything out or one that you like more than others. And if you think we're crazy to have the U of M boys up top. All right. Take care. We'll see you.
Pleasure's all yours, Bucky boys.